Chapter 2. Meanwhile, at Emsworth, our Hillman minks arrived. My father, Dad, had bought this for us in 1959, so Jane could be mobile at Old Jura Rock when I was out visiting farmers in my company VW Beetle. It was now covered in grease. It must surely have travelled as deck cargo. We still had no house of our own, so I found digs in Berkhamsted. Firstly, in a house with 3 other lads who spent a lot of time comparing notes on their lives with their mother-in-laws. I kept quiet. One lad was a postman. Listening to him about his work and home life, it all sounded pretty difficult. Since then, postmen have always had a high place in my esteem. I then moved for a time to Northchurch, a collection of houses and a few shops on the edge of Berkhamsted. There I was with a widow who complained loudly about her son-in-law who had taken her daughter off to Ceylon. One Sunday evening, returning late from spending a weekend with the family in Emsworth, I came hurtling round a corner down a single-width lane towards Northchurch. Coming towards me was another car. The Hillman rode up the steep, grassy bank that bordered the lane and returned down just past the oncoming car, incredibly without rolling over. The other driver and I pulled up, got out of our cars and walked back to one another. "My, you were going some," the middle-aged man said conversationally. What a wonderful English understatement, I thought. "Yes, sorry," I replied quietly. Nothing more was said. We returned to our cars. I imagined him scratching his head as he resumed his way up the lane. Perhaps England would indeed become my home again. Encouraged by the Cooper personnel manager, Jeff Lancashire, we were now looking around for a house. He obtained an offer on a 90% loan from Sun Life, and the 10% balance would be an interest-free loan from Cooper's. He took us round a few houses, and we selected one of a pair of new 3-bedroom houses in Marshcroft Lane, Tring. Price, £4,750. Our house was one of a few houses on our side of the lane that led to and over an arm of the Grand Union Canal. This was 100 yards away. The canal made its way down past us through the Berkhamsted locks 5 miles away. Opposite us, on the other side of the lane, was a farmyard and a large farmhouse owned by the Farmers' Weekly magazine. The 2 new houses, of which ours was one, had been built at the entrance to Marshcroft Lane, so rather than being numbered -1 or -2 by the post office, we named ours in the traditional style, Osborne. Our neighbours, Anne and Sidney Trussell, with their sons Derek and Richard, named their house the Warren. But the house was just a shell at first. Before Jane and the boys could move in, it would have to be prepared a little. I rang my cousin, Alan Oliver, an expert in wood preservation, and he advised me. I had to get down on my knees and clean and seal the wooden floors. I, the one who had told my fiancé years ago he planned to pay others to do that sort of work, had to get down onto my knees and clean and seal the wooden floors. Jane's small legacy from her great-grand was used for carpets and a wireless. Ma bought us some furniture locally and brought some up from Emsworth. Also, most importantly, she lent me a navy blue pinstripe suit belonging to a relation who was at present a Franciscan monk and had little interest in office clothing. In Nairobi, our office clothes had been khaki safari suits. If shorts were worn, that was okay, provided they were worn with long socks. Our household goods arrived in crates from storage. One had a hole in its side. We couldn't locate a cigar box inherited by Jane. She said it was solid silver. I claimed. The insurance man came, inspected, and paid up. Later, in a pile of newspaper wrappings, we found the cigar box. It was EPNS. At Cooper's, as assistant to JKW, I shared a minute office with JKW's other assistant, George Allen. George was a short man with a military moustache, a continuous smoker. He was never away from his pipe, filling it, smoking it, tapping it out, cleaning it. One of the I was in the war lot. He had been a captain, of course. I never heard anyone from the war admit to having ended it at a rank lower than a captain. He had been with Wingate in Burma and, I thought, expected to be admired for it. Anyway, obviously he was not too pleased to have to share his small office. Perhaps he was nervous that I was a threat to his job. He would often refer to the importance of the pension rights he had earned. He saw himself as being on the last stretch of his working life. George was numerate and had some knowledge of bookkeeping. Whenever he left the office, he would tap out ash from his pipe over the work on his desk. Why? I came to the conclusion it was so he could see when he returned if I had touched, moved, read anything. So I made sure to disturb it before he came back. George's job seemed to consist in the main of reading the correspondence between JKW and his overseas companies and passing on relevant extracts to interested parties such as the Cooper Technical Bureau, CTB. The CTB consisted mainly of veterinarians and entomologists. There was also a two-man equipment section, manager Ron Lee, a Clark Gable lookalike who had served in the RN in the war. He was typical of most of the CTB staff. They were proud of the work they did. They worked hard at what they believed was a worthwhile job, almost a calling. In general terms, Cooper's was based much on the thought that was fast becoming outmoded. If you make a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. Over the next few years, this approach to successful business was to be disproved in Cooper's many times over. The marketing concept was just arriving from USA. I would soon be taking my final exam for the Diploma in Marketing of the Institute of Marketing. The Cooper Company Secretary asked me to explain what marketing was all about. The 4 Ps, I replied. The right product, at the right price, with the right promotion, placed in the best distribution channels, all to maximize profits. Ah, he said. From time to time, the export manager, Peter Hanscom, PGH, responsible for sales in territories where Cooper's had no subsidiary company, would pop his head round the door of my little office, for no apparently important reason. PGH had been a help to me in 1961 during my working week at Berkhamsted while on leave in the UK, when no one else in Cooper's seemed interested in having anything to do with me if they could avoid it. Now, out of the blue, he offered me the job of a marketing assistant in his export department. Having been among the British Army that landed in France on D-Day, and having been wounded, he had had a good war. Occasionally he would remind people of this by touching the side of his leg wound. Sometimes, indeed, he would lean back in his chair with his relevant leg up on his desk, with the sight for all to see. Yet he had a veneer of being a bit of a stuttering bumbler. This hid a fervent love of exporting and ambition to progress further in Cooper's. One day he admitted to me he was cautious by nature. As a counter to this, he said he deliberately employed people who tended to be adventurous, quick on the draw. His aim was that, like the coachman of a mettlesome team of horses, he would get his department to the required destination in the quickest time, with the minimum of accidents. Anyway, JKW agreed to my transfer, and in no time I was ensconced in a decent-sized office of my own. My job was twofold. to identify and develop product marketing opportunities, and to service the particular needs of the export sales execs, particularly with regard to product development and distribution. PGH was convinced of the importance of product marketing alongside territorial development. He was struck by the potential benefits of having people who lived products working alongside sales staff who lived their territories.